StarCraft 2, just a few hours ago, updated the PTR, the public test realm. It's the server where you can check out all of the new changes from the new controversial balance patch that's been live for maybe 3 weeks or so. And I think it's fair to say that these changes that they're working on are really the most significant ones made to the multiplayer version of StarCraft 2 since like 2015. It's been more than a decade. Now, because of it, obviously, there's been a lot of heated debates, right? So the worker start count going down from 12 to 8 has been very significant. I want to say that most people have also had very strong opinions on the gateway changes. And then we've had all of the problems with the Ghost. The Ghost really does seem to be a little bit overtuned. A lot of Zerg players are saying that cheesing is no longer viable because of the way that Larva generation works. Overlord speed is too slow, so you can't really scout anything anymore. We've had a ton of bugs as well. For example, Changelings dealing a lot of splash damage to units surrounding them. Is that intentional? We don't really know. You can still research the Microbial Shroud, even though the Infestor already starts with it. It's all a little bit funky. It's all a little bit up in the air. But today, we've got an update. So let's figure out what it's all about, shall we? So thank you, everyone who participated and provided feedback. Well, there's been a lot of that. During PTR 1, we have made adjustments based on your feedback, and we have also updated the map pool based on community requests. So this is a very important thing to note. We've, of course, had the finalists decided from the Team Liquid map contest, and they will determine what the next upcoming StarCraft 2 map pool is going to be like as well. So I'm assuming that these changes, the balance changes, are going to coincide with a brand new map pool too, which is just going to shake up everything because the new maps are kind of crazy. Okay, so let's just start at the very top, because I've got pretty strong opinions on most of the things here, but let's just begin at the very start. Larva spawn rate increased from 10.7 seconds to 9 seconds. This right here seems a little bit odd, right? It seems a little bit strange. Why in the world would you make this a random change? It doesn't really seem that significant. This right here really does change the way that Zerg gets played, especially in the early game. So one of the main goals with the new patch is to introduce more early game variety. Variety really is the word that's been going around a lot. However, in order to go for most early game aggression as a Zerg, you kind of need 12 drones, right? So if you are comparing the PTR to the current live version of the game, in the live version of the game, you start with 12 drones and then you also have 3 larvae. If you're making a bunch of drones early on as a Zerg player on the PTR, and then you want to, well, get up to, say, for example, 12 workers, and you want to start some sort of aggression, you have 0 larvae because you just made an extra worker. This right here may very well open up a lot more opportunity for Zerg to be aggressive in the early game. A lot of the, for example, like Ravager Ling cheeses and really all sorts of early game aggression should become more viable because of this reasonably small change. I mean, it doesn't really seem that significant. 1.7 seconds is just kind of whatever, but this will really add up, especially early game. So I'm excited to see how this is going to work out, and maybe it will indeed allow Zergs to be a little bit more cheesy, which is ultimately what a lot of people like. I mean, maybe you don't like playing against it, but I think I'm, probably with the majority of people when I say that I really enjoy watching Zergs be very cheesy early game, or rather than just sort of be a punching bag, right? And that's really what Zerg has turned into over like the last 5 years. Early game, Zerg just sort of gets punched in the mouth, and then when they get up to like Overlord speed or maybe some sort of Roach Ravager aggression, then Zerg can kind of be aggressive out on the map. But especially at hatchery tech, there's just not really that much aggression that Zerg can go for, and I'm hoping that this is going to change exactly that. It's going to coincide with a very interesting change right over here. The Queen mineral cost has been decreased from 175 to 150. Now, this is, of course, a change that was made quite a few patches ago at this point in time. The Queen has always been 150 minerals, but then basically what they did is they changed the cost of the hatchery from 300 to 275, and then they increased the cost of the Queen with a previous patch from 150 to 175 to make up for it. We do not get a cost increase on the hatchery here, but we do get a Queen mineral cost decrease. I find this kind of curious. Now, I've always kind of thought that 175 and 275 were kind of ugly numbers. Maybe this is just a personal thing, but it kind of hurts a little bit whenever I see Zergs forced to cancel a hatchery that's building and they get an odd number of resources back. I know that this is a very specific me issue, but I actually think they should increase the cost of the hatchery back up to 300 if indeed they want to go through with the Queen mineral change. The thing is, Zerg early game is... It's weird, right? Because, yes, the Queen kind of allows you to be safe against everything, but at the same time, if you don't have Queens, there is no alternative. You don't really have good anti-air, you don't really get a whole lot of additional benefits from making other units, because if you, say for example, want to make a big batch of roaches early on to stay safe instead of queens, it's gonna cut into your larva production, and therefore you can't really make drones, right? And that's usually the reason you want to be defending in the early game, so you can build up a big economy. So the queen is absolutely pivotal. I would still really like to see some sort of experimentation with moving the Hydralisk Den to hatchery tech and then allowing the upgrades for the Hydra Den to be only available at lair tech. So maybe you can mix around some options there. Maybe at that point you could leave the Queen as well at 175. It could maybe potentially make mid-game timing attacks with, well, Hydra's a little bit too strong because obviously you shave the time of a timing attack off of the actual build duration of a Hydra Den. Anyways, I would like to see that. I've mentioned this a million times before, but we've never seen it in the PTR or tested in general. All right, anyways, the Overlord speed has also been increased from 0.7 to 0.85. Pretty significant increase. Now, what is actually, hold up, I need to look this up real quick. Okay, yeah, so the current Overlord in the live version of the game moves at 0.902. So the new version of the Overlord in PTR 2 is going to be faster than PTR 1, but slower than the live version of the Overlord. And that's absolutely critical that it's slower than the live version of the game, because you can imagine if you start with less workers, you also get free scouting as a Zerg, right? So you kind of need to balance that out a little bit. It was really slow. There were some marine openers where you could just basically guarantee the Overlord scout. So we already saw some Zerg players not even bothering sending their Overlord across the map. At which point, yeah, Zerg is just kind of playing in the dark and it makes everything extremely risky. I'm going to have to see what 0.85 looks like, but this does seem quite reasonable to me. And actually, to go back one step further, because we don't actually get a change to the amount of starting workers. There's been a lot of debate about that. Should we go back to 12 workers again, or should we stay at 8? We are going to be staying at 8, at least for the foreseeable future, it seems. And I would imagine it's probably going to go to the live version of the game as well. I thought initially when they announced it that it would be worse. I'm still not a huge fan of less starter workers, but it doesn't really seem to impact as much, especially if this is now with the larva spawn rate and maybe the queen mineral cost reduction as well, right? Zergs are going to be able to inject a little bit quicker. They're going to get more larva out. I guess this is going to allow Zerg some early game variety too, because really that was my main concern, that ultimately what ends up happening, and maybe this is still going to be the case, right? That the first minute or so of a game, all we're going to see at a high level is players build up to 12 drones or 12 SCVs to 12 probes, and then the actual game will begin as we are all used to. It's okay for me to add like a little bit of additional, I guess, startup time, but we've already seen some pretty cool variety, right? Like, for example, that series that Clem played recently on the PTR that I thought was very interesting, where he didn't make an SCV at the start of the game at all. He went 8 supply depot, 8 supply proxy barracks on the other side of the map, and then 8 supply refinery in the main base, and then finally, he would begin with a little bit of SCV production. Now, I don't know if that's a strategy that's here to stay, but if we are indeed going to be getting early game variety like that, I don't really mind the starter worker count reduction so much, although I still, yeah, it's kind of whatever to me. I don't really care that much. It's just kind of, yeah, it's whatever. It's really whatever. So the Warpgate Research, it's been reverted to be researched in the Cyber Core. It's called the Cybernetics Core, Blizzard. That's the name of the structure that you gave it. It's actually 2 words. Cybernetics Core. Anyways, this is obviously another really big thing, right? So the way that it's always been is that you can research Warpgate inside of the Cybernetics Core. The big problem with moving that to the gateway instead is that you can't simultaneously be producing a unit out of the gateway while you are researching the Warpgate Research. Meaning that you always have to make a choice as Protoss, whether or not you want to make absolutely no units at all but get Warpgates done, which is kind of risky, or if you want to make units, but potentially never be able to get the Warpgate Research in. It's kind of weird. I didn't really like it very much on the gateway, even though it's probably something Protoss players would learn to play around over time. It just seems to kind of needlessly complicate the early game for Protoss, and I don't really see the advantage of it. So They've decided to move it back up to the cybernetics core, and then simultaneously, the transform to Warpgate, it is going to be 25 minerals and 25 gas rather than 50-50. This was another one of those counterintuitive things from the very first PTR. So the idea is to create more early game variety, potentially allow Protoss to go back to like 2-base all-ins, right? So on 2 bases with Protoss, usually you would go for like an 8 gateway push. If you, on PTR 1, want to go for an 8-gate all-in, you would have to transform 8 gateways into warp gates, which would cost you 400 minerals, 400 gas. The literal cost of a mothership, right? Like, that's counterintuitive. If you want to do early game aggression, if you want to have more early game variety, here we go again with that word, it doesn't really make sense to slow Protoss down in that regard. So it's going to be 25-25. It will definitely still shake up the early game for Protoss a lot, because you still have to make the choice whether or not you want to be in Gateway land or if you want to be going to Warpgate land. It seems like, roughly speaking, there's like 3 types of Protoss right now, from the PTR games at least that I've seen. First off, Protoss players that just kind of pretend that the mineral and gas cost to transform a gateway into a Warpgate doesn't exist. They just transform every single one of them. Then we have Protoss players like, for example, Mana, that kind of now play Protoss as if they are barracks units, I guess, or gateway units, as if they're like coming out of a factory. He just never really transforms the gateways into warp gates. And then we have the third, the most advanced species of Protoss, and I think we'll probably settle somewhere over there, where they have like a bunch of gateways in gateway form and then a bunch of gateways in warp gate form as well. I do really like the thought process behind this, where it seems to be that now, if you want to go for some sort of early game defensive approach, right, you don't bother transforming your gateways into warp gates, because what's the point? You get the units to spawn close to home anyways. You don't really need to. However, if you then want to switch over to being aggressive instead, or if you just go for an aggressive strategy from the outset, then you would transform all of your gateways into warp gates. And it's an extra decision to make. It's an extra strategic layer. And I think adding that extra layer to the early game is really fun. It is certainly going to force Protoss to basically reinvent the early game. But I have faith that people can figure that out. People will figure it out for sure. So, various Warpgate gateway train time adjustments. Okay, doesn't actually specify exactly what that is. Fair enough. But we also do have a little bit of a 5% boost to the actual value of warp gates. So, real quick, right? If you get the warp gates research and you do not choose to transform your gateways to warp gates, you just keep on producing out of a regular gateway, your units will now spawn 40% faster than they do without the Warpgate research. So this is going to make regular gateway production even better. Now, obviously, that's always been the case in StarCraft 1, right? There's no such a thing as warp gates. In StarCraft 1, you just have gateways to produce out of, really similar to the way that you would produce with Terran. I kind of like it. I know the community is very divided on it, but I think it's really quite cool. So the Disruptor Phantom weapon attack range has been decreased, okay? Shield battery energies has been set to 75, okay? Very precise. I guess this is going to make it... Yeah, it's going to, again, change up the way that Protoss defends in the early game. Like, all of these changes combined just make it quite difficult to say exactly what's going to be going on there. Now, we have the Ghost damage reduction. Let's talk about this one for a little bit, right? So, the Ghost, for some reason, needs to be adjusted in every patch that we get. Don't know why. So real quick, they have gone from 2 supply to 3 supply in PTR 1, and they've gone from 125 HP to 100 HP. They've also had some changes to the base damage output of the unit. It basically now deals more auto attack damage, and they have nerfed Snipe to basically make it more expensive in energy cost, meaning that you can, on a full energy Ghost, only snipe twice rather than 4 times. Okay, that's the real quick TLDR of the Ghost changes. Now we're going to be reducing the base damage of the Ghost from 20 to 15. I agree, it did seem a little bit overtuned. And apparently we're going to also nerf the movement speed by a random number. This may be relevant to some particular engagement that I can't really tell off the top of my head. But this right here means that now units like Zerglings are going to be way better against Ghosts than they were in the past. Keep in mind that Ghosts always used to deal damage, like bonus damage to light. Okay. I don't really know why the ghost needs to be changed again. I still find it very odd to have a ghost at 3 supply rather than 2. It just, I don't know. It's a dude in a suit. I know that, like, that's not really relevant to anything, but now on the PTR, when you see Terran at 200 supply, and you look at the actual army that they have, when they are playing a normal macro game, it kind of feels to me like the army is, like, this big. It's because a lot of the supply is caught up by the Ghost, and the Ghost is so well-rounded, it feels like the new patch is gonna make the Ghost more well-rounded, and I don't really see why. What's the point? Why keep changing the spellcaster situation? I don't really quite get it. So, no changes here to the projectile damage of the Infestor or the High Templar. This is something I've been talking about quite a lot. I still find it kind of odd how the new PTR has introduced an auto attack on the Infestor, but not other spellcasters that don't have one. Years ago, the High Templar got an auto attack. Now the Infestor gets an auto attack. The Viper doesn't have an auto attack. In my opinion, honestly, get rid of all of the auto attacks on spellcasters or add it to all spellcasters. I feel like that would make sense, right? Like, either have an auto attack on all fragile spellcasting units or give it to none. Make it something that is based around skill expression and hotkeying and all the rest of it. But now we're kind of doing this middle of the road approach. It's kind of whatever. So we have a bunch of bug fixes as well. Fixed an issue where the auto turret did not receive Terran structure armor upgrades, okay. The Roach Rapid Regeneration passive icon now displays a research requirement status of burrow. Right, a little bit of a bug change. We also had some PTR-specific bug fixes, and there are quite a few of them. So, Changelings no longer deal damage to non-Changelings upon death. So, for those of you wondering, that was indeed not an intended mechanic. So, it was kind of fun to see, but it definitely did seem a little bit busted. Changelings basically were budget banelings that only cost energy. It was kind of fun to see, but it would certainly break the game in the long run, because it wouldn't be too long before Zerg players would figure out that all they really needed to do was make like 200 Overseers and just flood the map with Changelings, because it would ultimately kill everything that the opponent had. Yeah, that's probably for the better. Baneling Sound bug fix no longer reintroduces cliff level bug from the previous patch. Okay, the Infestation Pit no longer shows an effectless Microbial Shroud upgrade. This was a little bit weird. The Solar versus Beyond series comes to mind, where Solar was researching Microbial Shroud, even though his Infestors already had Microbial Shroud. So really all you're doing is you're wasting 150 minerals and 150 gas, and then you get nothing. You just get absolutely nothing. So, kind of interesting. Indeed, this was kind of dumb. Vipers can also correctly abduct sieged tanks. So this was something that was in the previous PTR notes, but wasn't actually changed in the PTR itself. So a couple patches ago, they changed the way that Viper abducts work. You couldn't use it anymore on sieged up tanks. Really weird change, really stupid change in my opinion. Now you can indeed go ahead and abduct sieged up tanks yet again. I feel like this is very reasonable. Bit silly that it wasn't already in the previous PTR, but whatever. It's a PTR, of course. It's supposed to be kind of a messy state of the game. Fixed various command card issues associated with selecting gateways and warp gates simultaneously. Okay. Orbital command now no longer grants an extra 2 supply. This is another one of the things that they meant to change, but then didn't. They changed it for the hatchery and the nexus, but they did not change it for the orbital command. Bit weird. Twilight Council research graphic will no longer appear in the improper location. Remember the couple of games where we saw Charge researching, and the little doodad that was added to the Twilight Council was just kind of up in the air, like a half kilometer above the Twilight Council? No longer the case. Ghost Academy nuke construction can no longer be auto-cast. Oh, I wasn't even aware of that. You could right-click the Ghost Academy's nuke construction, which would then automatically make a new nuke after you use the previous one? I don't even hate it. Archon merge completion sound volume reduced. Yeah, they added some new sound effects to Archons. Apparently the volume was a little bit too loud. Fair enough. Remove the Nexus Energy Recharge Actor Radius during placement. Okay. Reduce the artificial Oracle Stasis Ward deceleration. Disruptor Phantom weapon range has been reduced to 0.65. The Burrowed Roach attack target priority has been reduced from 20 to 19. And then the size of the Disruptor Purification visual range radius size has been reduced to match the attack range. So this legend on the StarCraft subreddit did some more precise testing, and he was also curious about the various Warpgate gateway train time adjustments. So these are now the values we're looking at. So the warp-in cooldown is identical to PTR 1, but this is apparently what we're working with. So the Zealot comes out 1 second faster, the Adept 2 seconds slower, aka it's the same again as the live version of the game. Stalker will go back to the live version of the game too. Sentry is going to be at 23 seconds again too, rather than 24. And the Dark Templar and the High Templar, for some reason, are coming out slightly slower than before. Okay. Look, a lot of these things I don't necessarily disagree with, but I do sometimes get this vibe that we have change just for the sake of change. Like, for example, these gateway build time specific adjustments, there's no way that the testing has been thorough enough to determine that a 1 second difference on like a Sentry build time has been significant enough in certain situations. Maybe they have a good reason, but I feel like a lot of the changes are kind of arbitrary. It's the same with, like, for example, the Storm, right? Where Storm's damage has gone down from, I believe, 110 to 100. Okay, sure. It's not that I really feel that strongly about it. It just feels kind of odd. And that's a lot of the changes. We don't really seem to get any real explanation as far as, like, the design philosophy goes. We don't really get a whole lot of intention behind the changes, other than we want to increase variety in the game. And the StarCraft community very quickly testing out that maybe variety is not going to be achieved in this way, and that you need to change a few more things instead. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the final version of 5.0.16. Maybe there will be an additional layer of adjustments, which would be kind of cool to see. What are my thoughts? I think it's fine. I don't think a lot of the changes are necessarily that important, but I think it's fine. I do think it's going to be interesting, especially to see how Protoss figures out the early game. And I do wonder how maybe Zerg players can now incorporate some early game cheeses again too. For example, not increasing the hatchery cost back up to 275 and then reducing the cost of the queen and increasing larva generation. It could very well mean that some cheeses for Zerg are going to be absolutely busted. And that could be a lot of fun to watch, right? Now, I do think that ultimately, as we reach equilibrium in like a few months' time, as the early game will settle, as everybody has figured out all of the new cheeses, we'll probably just get like an extra 45 seconds or so of additional build-up in the majority of the games. I don't necessarily hate that. I don't think it's necessarily a whole big issue, but I do think that that is almost inevitable, that that is the state that we will arrive in before too long. But until then, the game is very much so up in the air. A lot of strategies are going to be undecided. Everybody's going to have to relearn their early game build orders, and it is, in a nice way, like a big reset. A lot of strategies that people play, a lot of the early game build orders, haven't really been changed in like, I don't know, 5+ years. Early game build orders will have to change with this, and this is going to completely level everything out again. If you are returning to the game and you're looking up, okay, Protoss build order, you're gonna have to look for a build order guide from 2026. You can't just lean on a strategy that Stefano played in 2012, right? Like, that's, okay, maybe a slight exaggeration there, but you can't just play the old build orders as easily anymore. You're gonna have to make some adjustments, and I think that is pretty cool. So I think that this updated PTR is indeed a significant step in the right direction, but I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts as well. Let me know down below the like button in the comment section of the video. What do you think? Good? Bad? Terrible? Amazing?